the great family. This is the desert. Many important things happen in the desert. We don't have the entire desert with us today, but we do have something to help represent the desert to help us with our story. The desert is extremely hot. It's so hot, people had to wear many, many layers of clothing so their skin wouldn't burn. And at night, it's so cold and windy. Very few trees and plants grew in the desert because there was very little water. After the Great Flood, creatures went out in all 4 directions, but they found themselves living near the river so they could get water. Cities were built, and in one ancient old city, the city of Ur, many people believed that there were many gods. There was a god for the flowers, a god for the sky, a god for the rocks, a god for the plants, a god for the trees. But there was one family who believed that there was one God that was everywhere, and that was Abram and Sarai.
When it was time for Abram and Sarai to move, they followed the river. It took a very long time. They got there. Sometimes Abram would go off into the desert to pray. He would pray to God, and Abram came so close to God, and God came so close to Abram, that Abram knew what God wanted them to do. He wanted Abram and Sarah to move. So they moved to a new place. And again, Abram would go off sometimes to pray. He built an altar. And again, God wanted them to move. He would go off sometimes and pray. He built an altar. God wanted them to move again to their home, to where they would live.
Abram and Sarai did what God asked them to do. One night, Abram went out and was praying to God, and God let Abram know that he was going to be the father of the great family, and Sarai would be the mother of the great family. Abram didn't know what this meant. He thought it was impossible because he knew he and Sarai were very, very old. But God asked them to change their names. Abram would become Abraham, and Sarai would become Sarah. Later, when they were near their tent, 3 strangers approached them. Abram welcomed the strangers into their tent, and Sarai helped feed the strangers. These 3 strangers said to Abraham, and Sarah, that you are going to have a child. They laughed because they knew they were very, very old. What do you think happened? The strangers left, and soon Abraham and Sarah had a baby. They named the baby Laughter, and in their language, laughter translated to Isaac. So their baby was named Isaac.
When Isaac was grown, Sarah died. She was buried in a cave. Abraham was very sad, but he needed to get a wife for Isaac. So he sent his messenger into a city or a town to find somebody. He was by a well, and a lady named Rebecca helped him. They went to go, and she helped him feed the animals. He went to their house for dinner that night, and they talked. Soon they went home to where Isaac and Abraham lived. When Isaac saw them coming, he went out to greet them. And soon after, Isaac and Rebekah got married. And Abraham died. He was also buried in the cave by Mary. Isaac and Rebekah had children. And they had children. And they had more children.
And their children had children. And then their children had children. And your grandfathers and grandmothers had children. And your mothers and fathers had children. And all of these children, including you and me, are part of the great family. What a story. I wonder what it all means to you. I wonder if you can see yourself in this story. I wonder, what's your favorite part? What part of the story do you think you could change, and would the story change? I wonder what you think. Thank you for sharing the story with us today.
Thank you.